there guys, City and Chill. Another video for today. I know they're kind of few and far in between now. It's tough. Even though I'm back, it's kind of difficult to find motivation to not only play the game but to do videos, just because nothing really changed. Like, it was great for the beginning because I'd missed 2 DLCs and I had enough content to run, but now that I've kind of caught up to it, it's the same old mantra. But I've got a few videos I want to put out. My PvP Season 3 impressions is going to come soon, but I wanted to touch base on something that came out in the forums, I think yesterday, or could have been today. If you haven't seen it yet, the changes they're making, it's similar to what they did in the past. They're reducing the health pools of all the bosses in the T104 content, so basically like Security Breach, Artifacts, Lockdown, those raids. They're reducing the health pools. It's on test server right now. I haven't run them, so I don't know how big of a change it is, but if it's anything like what the changes were to Paradox and Nexus back when they reduced those in difficulty, then it's probably going to be a drastic change. Even before, Artifacts would take like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, even with a terrible pug. Lockdown would be, it's being done as fast as 15 minutes, but usually I think our runs for like 20, 22, 24 minutes. Artifacts is about the same, so it's not like old Paradox where you'd spend like 5 or 6 hours in the raid. Like, I've never had that. Even when I first came back, I think the longest lockdown, even pug, I've ever been in, maybe like an hour and a half. Like, I'm sure there's those bad pugs out there, but it's just not one of those raids that you're gonna struggle with because of the mechanics. And like, I know it's beating a dead horse, but it's DCO taking the exact same path, and then they say they're doing it on behalf of the community, and the community is calling for the changes, and some people welcome them. But it's pointless. It's not fixing any problems. Like, DCO, in the developer's mind, reducing content or buffing content is basically just increasing health pools, so that it basically, if the boss has like 1,000,000 health in one-shot mechanics, eventually you're going to get worn, just like survival mode, you're eventually going to get worn down, someone's going to get caught, the tank's going to rage crash, whatever, something happens and the group wipes, because it's more just like a marathon, and you didn't get the boss did so much health, you didn't get him down in time. It's not like the old raids where you actually had to deal with the mechanics. And they think that this is the quick fix or the easy thing to do, but it's not. Like, it's at this point, you have to go back to the foundational elements to actually fix this. And it's just increasing health or decreasing health pools is not how you manage difficulty. And even on the forums, like, people talking about like the novice and expert raids, that doesn't, like, having expert versions of these raids and novice versions, I don't think really is going to change anything, because it's not going to make it more difficult. They're just going to increase the health, and it's going to take longer. And just like I said before, like, they're going to add an extra 1,000,000 health to Calabec and Mantis, and it'll take that much longer to kill them. And eventually you get hit by the lasers or the fire spawns and like those mechanics. Like, that'll be the expert raid. It's not like they're going to add anything new. And they have to. There's so many ways that they could add elements into these raids to make them hard mechanically, and give, like, it's not even about being an elitist. Like, I'm not coming back to the game, I don't know what the game DCO is what is the target audience of DCO now. Like, I thought it was the casual people that, like, you know, the content was easy enough so that you could log in like once a week and still be up to date with some replays, and it's not like in the old days where you had to run like the alerts every single day to get that marker Krypton so you could get your faucet on the weekly resets. It's not like that. But with these changes and what I've seen from the test server, like the new DLCs, people are beating it like Amazon Fury gear. Like, you don't even need insect gear and everything else. Like, it's the difficulty isn't there. Like, are they catering to the audience that's like a bunch of, like, you know, 10 or 12-year-olds that like have never played a game? Like, what I can guess now is they're just catering to like DC comic fans. So people want to come into the game to play the storyline, so they don't want a hard game at all, and they don't want to get stopped in anything. They just want to play DCU for the storylines, because it's the same thing. Just like A and B, like, there's so many so many cutscenes in the new alerts on the test server. So much talking, like, you're basically talking as much as you are fighting. So it's if that's honestly what they're catering towards, is like comic fans, so they can play the game and have fun and don't want any challenging content or have to learn an MMO at all. Maybe that's what it is. But there's so many mechanics that were present in the game that they could bring back. Like they want to bring back the skill level to PvP, and they started introducing mechanics of PvP into PvE, and that was groundbreaking at the time, having bosses block break you and block and counter you, stuff like that. But they could go a step further and have the bosses or NPCs throw debuffs on you, so the tanks would have to cleanse. They could have a range timer so that the boss wasn't debuffed by a controller, didn't have an attack debuff on for if the attack debuff lasted for 12 seconds, if it relapsed for like 6 seconds and it wasn't reapplied, then the boss enraged and did something crazy, or same thing with like healing debuffs. If the debuff wasn't constantly reapplied, he'd gain health back. Mechanics like that. Like that's what would make the raid harder mechanically, but not have to worry about increasing health pools. If you have bosses that debuff the healers and trollers, that you're gonna have to see tanks paying a lot more attention. Most of them don't even take the cleanses unless it's a shield cleanse. But little things like that, even going back into the older raids, like what Inner Sanctum was, there are so many NPCs and mobs in Inner Sanctum that you could bring back now that they've nerfed them, because they don't do they weren't as strong as they were back then. But you could bring back the eye drones that would drain power. Like imagine those were spawning in survival mode, and you just have the ad spawned. You had about 5-10 seconds to kill it, and if you didn't, then you zap the power of someone, or even have him zap the power as soon as he spawns, just like you targeted someone in Inner Sanctum. One step further, you can bring the Nero Omax back. Like imagine, like even I wanted those back in like Prime Battlegrounds in DLC 3. Imagine one of the ads was a Nero Omax, so you just have the group stunned, or the tank would have to pull him away from the group and completely reposition. You know how much fun that was in Inner Sanctum, and having to worry about the Nero Omax. And now, it's a shadow of him former self. The shield armors, how annoying those were. The arrestor drones, like I think that was Outer Caverns, and those arrestor drones would stun you if you're not carrying the eggs. So basically your group would wipe because 2 or 3 people would be stunned by the arrestor drone, and it would be like a perma-stun. So it's like there's so many, like those raids were fun because not that they're hard because we weren't properly geared and we didn't have all this overpowered gear, but they were fun from a mechanics point of view. And I don't think, Inner Sanctum was really hard when they first came out, but I don't think people were complaining about them, saying nerf us. But it's, and nerfing the T5 content, saying that I think they said something like 10% of the people could beat it, and they weren't selling the DLC because it was too hard. Those are the things that DCO can't do if they want to, progress. Like I'm not even, like I know the days are gone of us getting another raid like Paradox, where it was like supremely hard, or FOSS 2 when it first came out took like 4 or 5 hours to beat. Like I know we're never going to raid like that again. But even having a smaller raid like Artifacts length or Necro length, but having boss mechanics that are at least fun and challenging in themselves, that's what the game needs now. But they're too blind to see anything like that. But thanks for listening to my rant. I'm sure there's a few more coming. Take care, guys. Have a good night.